Okay. I thought about today shooting our podcast, Trump has won or Kamala has won, and then, having all this is what to expect. We didn't do it. We're not going to do it. Oh. Well, they already are. Like, they've been tagging our Facebook for some reason on our little 3-minute videos. I don't know what we did. We've been marked.
The fact checker?
Yeah, on Facebook. We can't do stuff.
There's a lot behind.
So I guess we'll get going.
You're not going to wait for the guy to come in?
Is he coming? For here? He might be coming for something else. Okay. What time is it, Brian?
10 o'clock.
Okay.
10 o'clock.
I won't go over this yet.
You want to go ahead and start?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Because I'm sure I already told some people you start right at 10. Okay. Yeah, let's go. Thanks for tuning in for Investment Insight on Facebook Live and YouTube. Appreciate you guys coming today. Well, it's election day. If you didn't already vote, please don't forget to do so. So I thought it was a cool little fun fact. I always lose the election in the polls, and I always win the election on election day. Benjamin Netanyahu. Because if you think about a guy that's been in office and has come and gone, he's been a very common one to come and go. Another thing is not as much a problem here, but obviously we try to keep this a civil investment insight, and our numbers in person may be down a little bit because of that reason. So for the election, but we're going to go a little bit over certain key markets to see what the market is saying about who's going to win the election. The scorecard we usually use for the election, and I'll give them to you guys right now, is the Treasury market, the betting markets, the utility market, or utility sector with the S&P 500, the technology sector, the automotive sector, health insurers, pharmaceuticals, building materials, finance, green or traditional energy, and then what about the impact of China, Mexico, Europe, and equities in general. And so what we've always done in the past for Investment Insight or Coffee Club before is we would take that data and we would give a scorecard, and the number of people that win would determine who we think is probably going to win the election today or whenever it's decided. Okay. So one of the most accurate predictor, if you were to watch this today, and obviously this is an educational place, we don't guarantee who's going to win, we don't know for sure. We do our best to provide accurate information, but if it relates to your unique situation, seek out financial, accounting, and legal advice based on your unique situation. Okay, so the Treasury market is by far the most accurate predictor of who will win the election. Now, a lot of you guys think, well, why does that matter? It's the stock market. Well, actually, the bond market or the Treasury market is the biggest market really in the world are bonds. Why do you guys think that's the case? Well, when you put money in your bank, where do they put it a lot of times? They put it back into our government. Because treasuries are considered to be the safest investment on earth. So you can put money in your checking account, and then the bank can take it and put it in the Treasury market and make some money on your money. And so when we look at the Treasury market, in the last several times we've done this, the 10-year Treasury was the most important part of the market. The 10-year Treasury is what your Social Security and what your Medicare funds are put into. Okay? And so if rates go up, that typically means a Republican's going to win. If rates go down, that typically means a Democrat's going to win. Now, what's truly different about both of the candidates in this election is Donald Trump is not a traditional Republican. Kamala Harris is kind of a quagmire. We don't exactly know what she's going to do if she becomes president of the United States. But generally speaking, if rates go up, that means we get a Republican. If rates go down, that means we get a Democrat. Okay. Okay, now here on this in front of y'all, if you're not here in person, there's a chart. This chart right here shows you what the 10-year Treasury has done since October 1st. And so you right here, this is September. This is October. So if you guys see this chart right here, you guys see that curve? What have rates done since October 1st? They've gone up dramatically. Good morning, Doris. And so what that is an indication that Republicans, Donald Trump would be president of the United States. Because the idea is, if Donald Trump became president, he's probably taking Congress with him. Because it looks like the Republicans will probably get the Senate, they'll probably get the House, and if he becomes president, the government's probably going to spend more money. They're going to print more money. If they print more money, we're going to have more inflation. If we have more inflation, that means the Federal Reserve is going to raise. And even though the Fed's meeting tomorrow, nobody seems to care right now. But what's more compelling about this, so when we're doing our scorecard here, there's one for Trump. So I'm going to go here to the corner, actually. I'll do Trump, Harris, tied. So that's one for Trump. It's definitely the Treasury market. Now, what's more important is every election that I've studied, and I've only really studied since the 2000 election, whatever the Treasury market did on the day of the election, if the rates went up or down, determined who was going to be president. As I walked into this room, the rates were up 0.05% today. Not much. Well, it's enough. It's a big move. Now, when you are watching CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, CBS, whatever you watch tonight, if you'll pull CNBC and look at the Treasury market, it'll tell you who's going to win the election more than the people on TV. Because that market will be moving. There's a very wealthy investor named Carl Icahn, and he was at a party when Trump won the election, and he left and put $1 billion wager on the stock market that night, that the stock market was going to go up. So you will see a lot of movement tonight. And if you take anything away from this, if you want to pick one area of the market that's usually the most accurate, it's the Treasury market. Now, as we speak, I said there's a point for Trump. The day's not over yet. By the end of the day, that would be either a point for Trump or be a point for Harris. By far, that is the most accurate predictor. What this graph shows you right here is it shows you that Trump has been gaining momentum until about Saturday and Sunday of this weekend. Now here's what's even more interesting. They have what's called the betting market. Now technically it's illegal for you to gamble on who the President of the United States is going to be. But it's not illegal in Great Britain. So these exchanges right here are the ones in Great Britain. Now what I find even more fascinating is look at these charts right here. If you take the betting chart, red is Trump, blue is Harris. If you look at the chart here and you take the bond market chart, they have moved almost the exact same direction. So I'm going to bet you that the people that are moving the Treasury market, they may be betting on the side in the betting market, because the graphs are exactly the same. And this one graph here, sorry, didn't zoom in as well as I wish. We'll do that better in McMinnville later tonight. But if you just take this little part right here, it's the same exact graph. That they're moving the exact same direction. Now, that's the most important data there is. Now, in every major election, except for when Great Britain voted to leave the European Union, the betting markets have got it right. Except when they didn't, right? So understand that. So I would say that's one more for Mr. Trump. Okay, the next major part of the market, of the next industry to look at, is the utility market. Okay? Now, let me go back to the predicted markets. Okay? When we look at the predicting markets, there's two major markets, and I want to be consistent with what we did in the past. There's another website called Predictit. Predictit is a website that actually where you can bet on who's going to win the election, and it limits how much money that you can bet. So you can't bet $1 million on Predictit. You can bet $1 million on these other websites. So it's very interesting because the big money moves are causing these markets to show Trump's going to win. But until I walked in this room, the small betting, where you can only bet 10 or 20 bucks, there's a limit how much my camera inch it is, they were showing Harris was in the lead. And then all of a sudden this morning, Trump flipped to being slightly ahead. But it's moving at all times. So the small money market is showing a 50-50 race. The big money market is showing a Trump victory. So what we did today is I said, well, because Predictit is saying 50-50 with a little edge for Trump, and the other 6 major markets are showing Trump, I said that's a point for Trump. But it's possible that some wealthy individuals could be moving that market more than the actual market itself. Because people started paying attention to this, which means some of the data is not as accurate, right? Because then people start trying to manipulate the information. Okay, so let's talk about utilities. When we look at utilities, when you get your electricity, you really got 2 options, right? You got 2 different visions of the future. If we look at Trump and Harris, we're assuming that Harris is going to continue the same policies Joe Biden has continued in his presidency. That's an assumption that we don't know because guess what she's never told us?
What she's going to do. That's because Obama didn't tell her what to do.
Right. Well, and so we don't know. So one of the big things I say when we do this is normally we have a 2-year cycle where there's a primary, there's a vote, and there's a candidate, and there's another candidate. We've only had since August, and we do not know policy positions for Harris. So we don't know for sure if this thing we're doing is going to be 100% accurate because we are relying that what she is saying is she's going to continue the policies of Joe Biden, which she has said she's different than Joe Biden, but hasn't said how, in my opinion, other than she looks differently. Okay. So when we look at utilities, there's 2 main areas. You got what's called green energy, and you have what's called traditional energy. Now, I tried really hard yesterday morning to segment them out. It is really hard to do because most of the energy companies in our country are trying to do both. I don't know if you guys knew this, but TVA, actually it's funny, you know what one of the number 1 stocks was this morning when I walked in here? Generac. Do you know what Generac does? That tells people are scared. That tells you that people did a big generator order this morning, or something's going on where people are buying generators because they think they're not going to have power. Now, that's another sign of kind of like a 50-50 vote. You know, the market hates one thing over everything else. Uncertainty. Indecision. If we have a winner tonight, by the way, I'm still at the end of the story. Every election we've tracked, if we knew who the winner was, the stock market went up between November and December. Except for 2000, when we didn't know who the winner was. If we know who the winner is, the markets are happy. But Generac going up today, before I did this thing, is a sign that maybe we are going to have a 50-50 tie. That could be it too. That's a big part of it. See, that's the hard part for this too, is we're trying to look at stuff and they're not always related. Like yesterday, the biggest stock that dropped was Constellation Brands. They're a nuclear energy company. The government, they had done a deal with Amazon where they'd provide nuclear energy just to them. And the government said they couldn't do that. So did that stock go down 20%? When I looked at it, it was down about 20% because of Trump-Harris, or did it go down because of that Amazon deal? I would argue it went down because of the Amazon deal, but it does skew my data. Okay, so when we look at utilities, we think Harris favors green energy, and we know Trump favors all energy, but mainly traditional. You know, one of the things people don't realize with going green, one of the reasons why inflation, going green is contributed to inflation, is because, okay, imagine this. If you're producing power with a natural gas generator, you buy a generator, and when do you buy the gas? You buy it all at once? You buy it as you use it. So it doesn't cost much money to generate electricity with traditional energy because you just pay for the gas as you use it. With green energy, you pay for the whole windmill all up front, and you hope you get wind. Right? So you spend all the money up front, and there's not really any reoccurring costs as heavy until it runs out of life, but there's a lot of upfront costs. So a green energy transition is going to cause inflation because you got to spend all the money up. And then when interest rates go up, it now costs a lot more money, because when you're financing that at 1% interest, it's pretty cheap. When you finance it at 10, it doesn't make money. Okay, so when we look at, now I'm a big believer in nuclear energy personally, because I think it's a common ground. You don't have any carbon, and you've got clean electricity, and we don't have to worry about other countries because we've got enough to power ourselves. You know, the United Arab Emirates is converting their whole country to nuclear so they can sell their natural gas to us and other people. They're smart. That's a smart business move. That would be a good move. Okay. So when we look at utilities, the Vanguard Utility ETF, which basically buys traditional utilities, has gone from $175.33 a share to $166.25. The Clean Energy ETF through iShares has actually gone up a little bit. And the traditional energy thing has gone down. Now, I will tell you, Constellation Energy is a big part of that move, but it's very clear that energy companies have gone down in value, and that's a sign that for Miss Harris. Or I think I said Miss. Okay. The next one is technology companies. Now, this is very tricky, and this election has made it even trickier. Why? What did J.D. Vance used to do? He wrote a book. He's been an investor in technology companies. Right? What is Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris's brother-in-law, what does he do for a living? He's the head lawyer for Uber. So what? And we just found out, who's been the biggest donor to Donald Trump? Elon Musk, who owns a tech company called Tesla. Who's been some of the biggest donors to Bill Gates, by the way, came out last week. His $50 million donation he tried to hide through his foundation, they uncovered it. He gave her $50 million, probably early in July when she first got nominated. The big tech people gave her a bunch of money. Now, Jim Cramer, if you follow CNBC, he was on TV saying when she was first nominated, I support Kamala Harris because she's going to stop the breakup of Google. Did you guys know Google was getting broken up? Well, there was a lawsuit. So one thing, Biden has this lady in there, her name is Khan, and Wall Street hates her because she wants to break up monopolies. And she thinks Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon are monopolies. Facebook. And guess what? She's right. They are monopolies. Google does 90% of all searches in this country. And basically, Jim Cramer said through her brother-in-law that she's going to fire her the first day in office. She's going to get rid of her. And she started getting a bunch of checks from Silicon Valley. So this is where it gets a little bit screwy. Because we've got Tesla on this side, and we got Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Apple, and NVIDIA. And these make up what's called the Big Seven. The Big Seven tech companies. 7 of the biggest companies in the world. But as we see here, this one's on this side and this one's on this side. So I can't just take tech. I got to say what? This one and this one. Now my wife came down and she asked me how the election's going. I said, well, let's look at 2 companies today. And the 2 I look at the most is Google and Tesla. Because Google is directly affected if she wins. They're not going to break them up. If Trump wins, Tesla's going to be in good shape. If Trump loses, do you think they're going to have a score to settle with Elon Musk? You better believe it, right? So as I walked in here, Google was basically flat and Tesla was up big. Now, that's today. If we look at the last month, Microsoft's down 2.44%, Apple's down 2.8%, NVIDIA's up 9%, Google's up 0.57%, Amazon's up 5.16%, Meta's down 5.92%, and Tesla before today was down about 3%. Now Tesla's flat to up. So when I wrote this, I would argue that is a sign of Harris winning the election. But when I walked in the room, it was a sign of a tie. Which, that is interesting. That much movement's going on in between days. Okay? Now, you can say tie or you can say Harris. It's going to be one of the two. I'd say probably right now it's a tie. But you could clearly see by the end of the day, these numbers could all flip on that one. That by the end of the day, by the time the market closes today at 3 o'clock, that could switch. But if you're looking at 2 companies after hour trading, look at Google, look at Tesla.
After 3 o'clock.
Like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. So after the polls close in Pennsylvania, which we all know is the state that matters, they'll be moving those stocks. It'll be Google and it'll be Tesla. Okay. Next we have a very, very near and dear industry to people that live in Manchester, McMinnville, Hillsborough, Winchester, Shelbyville, all right, is Tennessee, the automotive industry. This is a hard one too, okay? Because when Trump first ran and Biden ran on a ticket of all electric cars. We want no more gas-powered cars. He said that in a debate. So you can't question he didn't say it. He said we don't need any more of these gas-powered cars. And it was in the second debate they did after early voting, after 70% of the country had already voted. By the way, what's weird about this election poll is we've got about half as many people voted early as last election. Most people, the election will be determined today. Okay? When you look at automotive industry, you have two types of cars, right? Electric, hybrid, and gas. Okay? Now here's where it gets kind of screwy, right? Who's the biggest electric car company in the world? Tesla. Who's the biggest owner to Trump in the world? Musk, who owns Tesla. So when I'm doing the scorecard here, it's not as simple as it has been years past, because in years past it was left or right, right or left, one or two. Now this is kind of a blend. Automotive companies, we looked at what I did to try to take it out. I just took Tesla out of it and said it didn't matter, because we can't really look at that stock and know. Because part of it would be for Harris, because she favors, we believe, electric cars. But then he's the biggest owner to Trump. Now, I think he's pretty smart as a business person, because if your biggest customers were Democrats and the Republicans weren't buying your cars, what's the best thing you could do if you wanted to sell electric cars? Become a Republican, because then they'll start buying your cars. I was at a meeting last night with some state of Tennessee officials, and they've all been buying Teslas. I don't think that's an accident, because they see the writing on the wall. Okay, so let's look at different companies. Let's look at Ford, General Motors, Toyota, Hyundai, and Stellantis, which is Chrysler. Okay. Now, here's my opinion on these companies, and you can take your opinion. Ford has really struggled going electric, but they spent a lot of money going electric. They got a bunch of money from the government to go electric, and they're losing $100,000 on a $100,000 pickup truck to go electric. So obviously, I think Ford is more in the Harris camp. If Ford stock does well, I think that's good for Harris. But maybe not. They may be not doing electric anymore. And they're going to make a lot more money in their gas-powered F-150 than an electric one for a long time. General Motors has not gone fully electric. They've done more hybrids and more gas-powered. So they're more of a Trump company. Toyota, being Japanese, they're pretty smart. They're hybrids. They're right there in the middle. Hyundai, they're a little bit more towards electric. They're the second biggest. Hyundai also owns part of Kia. Those companies are the second biggest electric car companies in the United States, I believe. So that's more for Harris. And Stellantis, they make gas-powered cars. So they're more Trump. Okay. So let's look at the stocks and how they've done since October 1st. Ford is down 1.18%. General Motors is up 14.43%. Toyota is down 3.72%. Hyundai is down 7.54%. And Stellantis is up 3.9%. So if you look at cars, it's very clear what the stock market is saying about automotive. And I don't know what it's doing right now while we're talking. So I always say this. It's too bad we can't do a 4 o'clock investment insight, because then we'd actually have the end of the day data. But I guess we could have. That's one for Trump. Okay. Now, but you guys understand the thinking on this? Now, what's weird about this is Tesla is actually flat today. When I was doing this, they were down. So that could be a sign for Harris or for the other one. Well, but is it up to even? It's got to be up. It's got to be up 4%. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So sorry, Hayden. It's up over the 12 months, over the month. And so then you've got the next one is the big ones in my mind is healthcare. So you got health insurance and you got pharmaceuticals. And they typically are at war with one another. Okay? I remember I was lifting weights with my ex-brother-in-law when Obamacare got passed, and I'm like, and he's telling me the world's going to end, like a lot of people are probably telling you as well. And then I looked at the stock market, and the hospital stocks were up. And the healthcare companies went up when that law was passed. Wait a minute. I thought they were bringing down the cost of healthcare. Why would the stocks go up if the costs are going down? It's because they're making money off of it. It had nothing to do with what they told you, and it didn't occur like they said. Okay, so when we look at health insurance, usually Republicans are good for health insurance company, and Democrats are bad. So historically, the Democratic Party wants more people to have health insurance, which means more poor people get free care, which is paid for by somebody else or by the government. And the Republicans want less people on health insurance because they can take the sick people and get rid of them. Like the third highest sold health insurance company in our area, they actually are a health plan, not health insurance. So if you get sick of cancer, they can drop you. And they don't tell you that. The agents don't. But it's the third highest sold health insurance plan in Coffee County. So if you get cancer and you want to go to 80 Answered, they will not cover you. So think about that when you get your health insurance. Okay, you want health insurance, not a health plan. That's what you want to ask them. Do I have health insurance or do I have a health plan? Okay. But what's very interesting is health insurance companies have given more money to Republicans than Democrats for the first time since I've been tracking this. Now, to give you a little sneak peek, pharmaceutical companies have given more money to Republicans than Democrats for the first time that I've been tracking this. Now, usually the drug companies are more Democratic focused. Why? Okay, let me give you a statistic. Everybody knows we have a fentanyl crisis in this country. Do you not agree? And you know fentanyl kills more people than car accidents. When did opioids become widespread in America? The year after Obamacare was passed. Because then they gave free insurance to people that were poor. And they required the insurance to cover prescriptions. So, let me get this straight. I get free insurance and I got free drugs. Is there a correlation? Don't believe me? Look at the deaths from opioids and compare year to year, and they doubled after the law was passed. That's not a political statement. That's a fact. Okay? Unintended consequences. Okay? So drug companies tend to like Democrats, and they tend to not like Republicans. Now, that tends to be. But what's weird is, for this cycle, the drug companies gave more money to Republicans, and the insurance companies gave more money to Democrats. Which is truly odd. Also, if you remember too, Trump approved more generic drugs than any president in history when he was president of the United States. What do drug companies not like? Generics. Because if you get generics, nobody makes any money. Right? Okay. So, IHF, ETF, which is the big insurer ETF, was down 5.33%. Ryan Specialty Holdings, which is a smaller insurance company based in Chicago, was down 7.68%. And they're the biggest individual donor. Weird. I don't know who this company is, but I'm betting we're going to hear about them again if the Republicans win. Because they're the biggest individual donor to the Republican Party in the insurance sector in this cycle, and I've never heard of them before. Which I didn't do a lot of research on. I probably have heard of something they own. Okay, this is an advantage for Harris. So it may be 3-3, maybe 3-2. You just look at it how you want to look at it. Now, pharmaceutical stocks, in general, benefit from a Democrat president. They are down 2.08%, and that's an advantage for Trump. But it is weird. They're giving more money to Republicans, and then the health insurance companies give more money to Democrats. I mean, what a screwy situation, right? You got an electric car manufacturer who's the biggest donor to the Republican Party. And health insurance companies are the biggest donors to the Democratic Party when on their platform it says Medicare for all, we don't need any more health insurance. Do you see that whoever wins the election is not as big a deal as you think it is? Because what you're being told and what's actually occurring is a little bit different. It's very clear with the money. Okay. The next one we have is building materials. Okay. Now this is interesting because one of Trump's platforms is to put a massive tariff on China and other countries like Europe and make them bring the manufacturing back into the United States, Mexico, well, really the United States is what he says. Okay? So if you're in the building material business and you thought Trump was going to win, what would you start buying a lot of? If we're going to build $10 trillion worth of factories, are you going to need copper? You're going to need steel? You're going to need wood? Oh, yeah. So you need land. You need everything, right? That's what we would need. Okay. So over the last 30 days, now what's even more funny is building material companies have given money to Republicans 3-1 over Democrats. So it's very clear where building material companies stand. They're in the Republican side, Democratic side. Okay? Over the last 30 days, they are down 1% before I checked this morning. That's an advantage for Harris. Because those companies, if they really think there's going to be massive tariffs, there's going to be massive building, those companies should be up like crazy. Now, there is one caveat here, which is China. China is where we get most of our building supplies for, and they've overbuilt their supply producing facilities. Their steel production, all this stuff, and they've been dumping that stuff on America. And they started doing that really heavily about 6 weeks ago. So I give a disclaimer on that, right? Because they're dumping the market right now. Okay? But that is an advantage for Kamala Harris. Okay. The next one are banks, financial companies. Not to poke fun at a local company, Darla, but you'll like this. One of the local companies, they've been spending a bunch of money on marketing, but they cut out their dividends. So they did some fireworks and all these other shows and all these other things, but they're not paying their shareholders any money. And one of the biggest things that I would say if I'm a shareholder is, you're spending a lot of money on advertising, but I want my dividend. I want my interest. And so one of the things that financial companies do is they're very concerned about regulations. So after 2008, we passed a bunch of laws that said the banks have to keep so much money in reserve in case there's a problem. Now imagine this, right? Imagine someone going to you saying, I know you have $100,000 in your checking account, but you can't touch it. Because if you run out of money, I want you to what? Be able to touch it. I can't use my money, but it's got to be there in case I want to need it. That's how we've regulated banks. And so the banks really care about regulations because they're not allowed to pull their money out of the company and give it to their shareholders unless they get approval from the government. So do they really care who the president is? more than any industry probably there is. Okay? So XLF is an ETF that owns all the major banks in the United States. And we've been using this since we started tracking presidential elections. It's up 1.58%, and the overall market is down in the same period of time. That is a big sign for Trump. Because bank companies definitely want Donald Trump to be president. If you look at the performance of banks and their stocks, you guys realize regional banks, mid-sized banks, have made no money for their shareholders in the last 16 years. Now, here's why that matters. If you look at a bank like Capstar, which used to be First National, now is Old Republic or something, what has that stock done? It's gone down ever since they bought it. Well, what that means is your local banks, your First Visions, your Peoples, your Homeland Bank, your Security Federal, your First National banks, those banks can't be purchased by another bank unless a mid-sized bank does well. Okay? And those companies want less regulations. Okay. So that's a win for Trump. The next one we have is, besides utilities, is green energy versus oil. Don't you guys agree those are pretty good ones? Green energy versus oil. Now, what's interesting is, what president have oil companies made the most money under? U.S. ones, anyway. Who is it? What's his name? Joe Biden and Obama, right? Obama at first, then Joe. Actually, Obama made the most money. Wait a minute, I thought he wanted to get rid of oil. Well, here's the thing. They sell a commodity. They sell corn, basically. They sell oil. So the reality is, if you don't let them produce much, what's the price do? It goes up. Okay. Now, this is where we get kind of complicated, and this is another one that's I can't tell you who the winner is in this. If we look at IEO, which is U.S. oil and gas production companies, they are down 6% since October 1 in the last month. They were up 2% though yesterday. Did you hear me? 2% yesterday. Clean energy ETF, the iShares Clean Energy ETF, was down 4.84% last month, but was up 2.47% yesterday. So both the green energy companies and oil companies both dropped in the last month. So I call that a tie. But you might give a slight edge to Harris. You could say, well, the oil companies are down more than the green energy companies, but it's just fractional, and it's probably different right now than it was when I did this. So I think that's a tie. But you could argue with me, and you might be right. Okay. The next big ones are not really in the stock market. They are in China, Mexico, and Europe. Who is the most concerned about Donald Trump being president? China, Europe, and Mexico. So if you guys are familiar, there's something called Bretton Woods, which was an agreement the United States made after World War II, that we would allow the rest of the world to sell stuff to us without tariffs. Why did we do that? What happened before World War II? It's the Great Depression. What happened before that? World War I. And what we realized was back then that we were affected by what happened overseas. Before World War I, we were isolationists as a country. We didn't care what happened over there. We just cared about. But after 2 world wars and a Great Depression, the Great Depression started in a bank in Austria, by the way, and the World War I, started in the Austrian Empire as well. And the World War II was started by an Austrian who moved to Germany named Hitler. Or you could say the Japanese started it when they invaded China. But really, it all started in that country of Austria, which is a pretty small country. And you could blame Stalin, too. That other little country called Georgia, which is not a state, by the way. It is a state, but it's not the state. And so we decided that we were going to let those countries get rich investing with us, and we're going to help them get rich, because if they got rich, they probably wouldn't kill us. Because the thing about it is, when you get rich, you get fat and lazy, which means you don't want to fight. I was doing a podcast this morning on the Romans, and they're like, even the Romans are like, man, those Gauls are tough. They don't have hot baths, and they fight to the death. Caesar was talking about how he wanted to be like a Gaul, how the Romans were becoming lazy. This is Caesar, who, by the way, said free food for all. So that's when they started stabbing him. But anyway, free food for life. That's what he said, actually. Okay, so would you say the Chinese stock market would be affected if Donald Trump wins? Right? Absolutely. So let's talk about what their stock market is. Now, the Chinese stock market has 2 stock markets. They have the Hong Kong market and the Beijing market. Both of them are manipulated, but the Beijing one is the most manipulated. The Hong Kong is the most free. Is it free? No. Okay. So since October 1st, the Hong Kong stock market has fallen from 22,433 to 20,567, or has lost 10% of value in the last 30 days. Now, it is still up 20% this year, though, in the last year. So that includes part of last year. Our stock market's up 30% over the last year. Now, that doesn't mean from January 1 to October. I'm saying October to October. Okay? So it's a little funky. If you look at the last month, which historically we base our decisions based on what happens a month before the election, and the day of. If you want to see another thing to watch tonight, watch the Hong Kong stock market at 8 or 9 p.m. Because they would have just opened, and if it moves a lot, you know who won. I'm giving you little pieces of, where before they call it on TV shows, if you look for these little pieces, you'll see them. Okay? I'll be up all night, by the way, so don't you worry. I'll be awake the whole thing. Okay, so that's a win for Trump. Mexico. Now, this is a pretty cool thing. I should have printed this graph. I didn't print it. We're actually okay on time, so I would have printed it if I would have known. But do you guys know that when Donald Trump went down the escalator at the Trump Tower and walked up to declare himself president, he caused the Mexican peso to go nuts? Okay? So when he walked down that step, when he announced he's president, the Mexican peso traded 15 pesos to US dollar. Okay? When Trump became president, it went to a high, right before he left office, of 24 pesos per dollar. You guys understand that their country lost 60% of its economic value when Donald Trump became president of the United States? Yeah, well, because, Darla, it's very clear in this data, he reduced immigration. When you reduce immigration, you reduce how much money is going in that country. And so what happens is, a lot of people that work and live here that are from Mexico, they make their money and they ship it back to Mexico. And what that does is, that creates demand for Mexican pesos when they convert it from dollars. And when you create demand, the price goes up. When you destroy demand, the price goes voila. Now, this is really fascinating. When Biden was up in the polls this year, it was back to 16 pesos per dollar. As I was doing this, it was up to 20 pesos per dollar. And is down 1.4% in the last month. So if you want to look at another one to look at the Mexican peso dollar tonight. All these are going to move the same direction, by the way. If you got a little graph, you just name those 7, you'll see all the same. It'll all be the same way. Okay, that's an advantage for Trump. Okay, Europe is really, really concerned about Trump being president. Why? Does Trump believe in Bretton Woods like his grandfather probably did? Maybe they didn't believe in it, but like our grandparents? No, he thinks those countries take advantage of the United States because they sell more stuff to us than they let us sell to them. Because the truth of it is, and he's right, the question is it the right move? I don't know if it's the right move. Because by the way, if our country becomes really strong and all these other countries become poor, what happens next? A war. Money causes wars. Russia's in Ukraine because of natural gas. Long story, not going to go over it today. Okay? So Europe's very concerned. So the euro would go down if Trump was going to win, and the dollar would go up if Trump was going to win. It would do the opposite if the euro is down 2% in the last month, which is another sign that Trump's going to win. Okay. In 2016, CEMEX. You guys ever heard of CEMEX? I think this is really cool. CEMEX is the largest concrete maker. And in 2016, when we were doing Investment Insight, it went up 7% the day of the election. Because if you're going to build a border wall, you need a lot of concrete. And by the way, that company's based in Mexico, so the Mexicans will build it. We'll just pay them for it. Because the concrete manufacturer is in Mexico. And so it is up. It was up 2% yesterday. I don't know what it's up today or if it's down, but it was down the last 30 days. Not a great indicator because of some other issues, but that's one thing to look at. Now, if you look at our scorecard here, it's 8-4, 8-3 with 1 or 2 ties. So if we were betting on what the market is saying today, we would say the market is saying Donald Trump's going to be president, the next president of the United States. However, the biggest thing we want to see for the markets is a winner. Look, if you own an ETF and you own an index, do you care if Google or Tesla goes up? Not really, because you own both of them. So you just want to see a winner. The worst case for us and investors, and it's something that the market is not prepared for, is an unknown decision that goes on for weeks and weeks. If that occurs, we're going to lose money in the short term on our investments between now and that period of time. But statistically speaking, elections tend to move in one direction. All the pollsters are scared to death of the polls. Why? They've been wrong. 2012, they showed Mitt Romney and Barack Obama tied, and Obama beat him by over 3 points. 2016, they showed Clinton up by so much that she didn't even have to campaign in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. She didn't even leave her house for the last week because she already had it in the bag, and she lost by 1 point. In 2020, one of the polls showed that Biden was up by 16% in Wisconsin, and he won by 1. They were off by what percentage point? 15. In general, pollsters have undercounted Trump votes by 4 to 5% in the last 2 elections. Now, it's possible that after making that mistake the last 2 elections, they could be overcounting them now. Right? Because, and we talked about the last election, when we did Investment Insight, in 2020, I said, well, it looks like it's going to be a close election, and Biden's going to win just barely. And what happened? That's what happened. And all the polls said it wasn't going to be close. My guess would be, if I had to bet, that if Harris wins, it'll be close. If Trump wins, it'll be big. If I was guessing, that's what I would guess. And I just make that guess, but it's a hard guess, and it's hard for the markets because last time, 70% of the people voted earlier by mail. This time, probably 35% of the people or 40% have voted earlier by mail. So 60% of the electorate is going to vote. So do we really have any idea? We really don't know. And the markets have been right going back, except for 2 elections, the last 120 years. But that doesn't mean they're not going to be wrong this time. And that doesn't mean, and as investors, what I want to implore you is, look, if you don't like the current president that wins, it's okay. In 2 years, they start running again. And you'll have your day to think about somebody else. And the reality is, all the stuff they're promising, they can't deliver. So it's not going to happen. And you're going to have to go about your business the next day, just like you are today. It's going to be okay. You know? And so the reality is, the markets just want to know who the winner is. And they're going to load up on the different types of investments based on who the winner is. You know? And in our portfolio, we moved more conservative about 12 weeks ago. In our portfolio. Doesn't mean you're not going to lose money if the markets go down. But we just moved more conservative 12 weeks ago before all of this stuff started happening. I had somebody call me yesterday, I got to sell everything today. Well, you're a little late. You know, I mean, at this point, the volatilities are there. And it's been very calm for an election. I will say, this is the calmest I have seen it since I've been a financial planner in my career. Normally, we see a 6 to 7% decline. The monthly election, we lost about 1%. And we're up almost 1% today when I came in here. So the markets don't seem to care because they understand that, like we talked about with healthcare, right? The Democratic Party in their platform says, we want all health insurance companies to be part of the government and no more private companies. The biggest donor they gave money to this year was health insurance companies, to the Democratic Party. Number 1 rule in politics is don't bite the hand that, right? Okay? Why do you remember Trump? I hate electric cars. They're terrible. Who'd buy one? Actually, no, they're pretty good. Just track it. Ever since he got shot and Musk started endorsing him, giving him money, what happened? You're going to see him pull up. I guarantee you, this will be the best story ever. If he wins, he may pull up an electric car for his inauguration. Right? He'd probably pull up in an electric garbage truck for his bedroom. Anyway, so my point is how easily he's been converted. So the main point as investors is recognize there's a lot of money involved in this election. There's a lot of money involved in every election. And the money determines who the loyalties are. I don't like that. It's not a great, maybe, it's not very George Washington-esque view, but it's the truth. Go ahead.
Have you looked at the Farm Bill, the law of why it's not passing?
Which one?
Farm Bill.
The Farm Bill? I've not looked at the Farm Bill lately. I know what's some of the stuff in the Farm Bill is usually food stamps and then government subsidies for crop insurance.
Right. A lot of farmers are going out.
Well, I mean, the reality is,
They're
Well, we actually have the highest crop yields in American history this year. And we actually, our cornfields produced 40% more corn than they did 10 years ago.
Right.
So we actually are pretty good. And we didn't have any rain here in Tennessee. We had terrible corn at my farm. We had terrible corn here. But if you go to Iowa, Indiana, Illinois,
200 bushels an acre.
yeah, they got crazy amount of rain. And so farming is, if you think the stock market's dangerous, become a farmer. Stock market's got nothing on the farming market. But one of the main things, if you look at food, if you want to bring down food prices, one of the main things you can do is stop turning ethanol into fuel and start taking oil and use it for fuel and start eating the corn instead of making it a ethanol product. That's a main thing to do. And so, but the problem is, in Iowa, that doesn't sell very well. In Illinois, that doesn't sell very well. In Indiana, that doesn't sell very well. And that's a big deal when you're courting farmers also in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And by the way, those states kind of touch, so I bet there's some farms there too that have the same thing. But no, I mean, that's why farming is becoming more of a business than a family farm operation. But if you look at the equipment it takes to farm now, I mean, it's kind of like us, right? If I told you that we were going to hold all your money in this office, and we were going to be the custodian of funds, which several people do around here, that's stupid. You got Charles Schwab, much bigger company, a lot safer for you all, better insurance than I can provide. So why would we want to do that? You got to go big, or you? I don't love that, but that is where we are as a country, and that's where the markets are. But the good news is, if we have a winner, we're in pretty good shape. And eventually we will have a winner. At some point, it may be the Supreme Court decides, like 2000, but there'll be a winner. Now, what I think is really weird to me is all the polls say it's tied. How is that possible? I don't believe that's true. I think they're messing with the data, and somebody's going to win tonight, and it's going to be over. And if you don't believe me, look at the Chinese stock market, look at the Mexican peso, look at the European market, look at Google, look at Tesla, look at the Treasury market. They're going to show you an indication. The last election, because of so many mail-in ballots, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan could not get it figured out, so we didn't know till the next morning, but we did know by that evening what the trend was looking like. And Pennsylvania did rule, the Supreme Court did rule, or I think it's local Supreme Court ruled that they're not going to accept any mail-in ballots after the day of the election. But that's probably going to be a court case to the Supreme Court tonight.
And all the mail-ins have to be reviewed and ready by an hour after closing or something? Is that true?
That is currently what the law stands. But what do you want to bet, Darla? That tonight something occurs where that goes up to the Supreme Court tomorrow morning. And by the way, if you recognize that we had Trump as president, you had Biden as president, the markets have done well under both men. Harris is a continuation of both. All these people that gave her this money, do you think Bill Gates is expecting a benefit from his $50 million? By the way, the Google guy, he's been really reaching out to Trump lately. Because what's he concerned about? Right. And they have 90% of every search on the internet is done through Google. When Microsoft did that through that company called Netscape, what did they do? They said, you got to turn this thing off. You can't use it anymore. Then Google came around. Microsoft would own that if the government didn't make them shut down. And then Google came around. So how quickly could Google go away? Pretty quick. So anyway, any other questions, guys? We'll see. But the thing I will tell you is, appreciate you guys being respectful. we've had some challenges and some other investment insights with that. So I appreciate that being respectful. And the good thing is, I'm hoping I never have to talk about this election again until the next one. Thanks for coming. Thanks for tuning in online for Investment Insight.
Take care.
I'll do my best.
Good job.
Thanks.